Rwanda and Uganda are accused of backing a rebellion in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. A leaked UN report says the uprising is being commanded by Rwanda's Minister of Defense. Both governments deny supporting M23 rebels who are battling the Congolese government. So who is driving the rebellion in the DRC? And are the militias being used as proxies in a battle for the country's vast mineral wealth? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Darine Abougaida. It's a country that's been racked by conflict and corruption, and the Democratic Republic of Congo seems unable to shake free from the cycle of violence. Now Rwanda and Uganda stand accused of backing the latest rebellion in the east. A UN report says both countries have sent weapons and troops to support rebels from the March 23rd armed group. M23 fighters have been waging a 6-month fight against the Congolese army in North Kivu province. And the UN says Rwanda and Uganda jointly supported a series of attacks in July in which a UN peacekeeper was killed. Now, both nations deny any involvement with M23. Al Jazeera's Peter Gresta has been following events from Kenya's capital, Nairobi.
This is the armed group M23 trying to look like a government. The rebels are firmly in control of the strategic town of Rutshuru, and they've set up their own administration. The commander looks more like a campaigning politician than a military officer, shaking hands as much for our cameras as for local goodwill. If the latest report by a UN monitoring group is to be believed, this is part of a Rwandan project to secure the region by default, to extend its political and economic influence over the border into the mineral-rich region. The allegations aren't new. Rwanda has long been accused of supporting M23. But the new report says the Rwandan Defence Minister himself is personally in control of the rebellion, passing orders through his Chief of Staff and sending in troops and weapons to help.
How are you?
Rwanda hasn't responded to the latest allegations, but when I met President Paul Kagame earlier this year, he robustly denied any involvement.
I should not be accused of that. This is what I'm saying.
No, I'm not saying that you are.
That's what we are accused of. We should not be accused of a mess in the DRC, period. If the DRC is messed up on the hands of its own leaders and lack of institutions, it should not be transferred to Rwanda. This is what I'm talking about.
The UN report also extends its allegations to Uganda, whose president, Yoweri Museveni, has been hosting a series of summits on the crisis. The report's authors say that while the talks were underway, Uganda was dispatching weapons and troops to help the rebels and give them political support. All allegations that undermine President Museveni's attempts to cast himself as the region's honest broker. When we were last there in August, M23 fighters told Al Jazeera that they were simply disgruntled Congolese troops trying to do what the government could not. The UN monitoring group clearly believes that is a lie, intended to hide a much more complicated crisis that is threatening to expand into another regional war. Peter Gresta for Inside Story in Nairobi.
So, who's backing the rebellion in the eastern DRC? To answer this question, I'm joined by our 3 guests from the UN in New York: Olivier Nduhunigirehe, a Rwandan diplomat and first counselor to the permanent mission of Rwanda to the UN. From London, Fred Robarts, former coordinator of the UN group of experts on the DRC, and he was based in the Congo for 6 years and has worked for the UNDP, the ICRC, and Human Rights Watch. And from Brussels, we're joined by Kris Berwouts, a political analyst and historian specializing in Central Africa. Welcome to all of you gentlemen to this edition of Inside Story. Olivier, if I can come to you first, what is your response to these very serious allegations made by this leaked report from the United Nations that Rwanda, your country, is supporting the M23 rebels? It's sending weapons, it's sending troops into the eastern DRC, and also recruiting soldiers for the M23.
Thank you very much. Let me be clear about what you are talking about here. This is not a judgment. this is not the final word. This is just simply a list of accusations that will not stand scrutiny in the lowest imaginable court of law. And we need to understand what it's all about. There are two issues here in this report. There's an issue of the coordinator of the group of experts and the issue of sources of those allegations. Talking about the coordinator, Steve Hage, he may be a nice man. He is entitled to his opinions as a private citizen or an activist, but he has appointed by the UN Secretary General to lead this group of experts. And the problem is that what we have seen is that Steve Hage has written in 2009, before even being appointed coordinator of that group, a document called Understanding the FDLR. I have this here. And when he clearly says that the FDLR who committed genocide in Rwanda are actually the victims of the Rwandan government, and then the international community has to soar on the Rwandan government in order to negotiate with the FDLR. This is the first point.
1 second, Olivier. So what you're saying is that then this report is baseless. Is that what essentially you are saying?
It is baseless, not only based on that, but also on the sources, because we don't have any single fact, any factually based evidence to for these accusations. It's just allegations,
the group of experts,
second-hand,
the group of experts do say, and I'm quoting here, that various South African, European, Ugandan, and Burundian intelligence agents also confirmed the group's findings concerning Rwandan violations of the UN arms embargo. But let me ask you flat out, is Rwanda supporting the M23 rebels?
Not at all. As I said, this report has zero credibility. It is nonsense because there's no evidence at all. Just hearsay, second-hand or third-hand witness from intelligence officers from DRC, so-called M23 defectors who all have interest in pointing out their finger against Rwanda. That there is no evidence. If I may ask, if there is any aspect of the report that may convince beyond reasonable doubt that this report is accurate, there's none. It's just hearsay evidence and allegations, not a single material evidence or factually based evidence. If Rwanda, because the report is not only accusing Rwanda of supporting M23, they accused us to have sent thousands of troops in North Kivu to fight along the M23. If we had sent those troops in DRC, don't you think that we would have not one, not two, but mountains of smoking guns, mountains of evidence, uniforms, dead body, but we'll have nothing.
All right, let's just take a moment to go over the main findings of that leaked UN report again. Now, it says the rebellion in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is being armed by Rwanda and Uganda, as we're saying. Now, the rebel leader receives military orders direct from Rwanda. That's according to the report. And Rwandan and Ugandan army units supported an attack which killed a UN peacekeeper. Let me bring in Fred. Fred, Rwanda has been accused in the past of supporting the M23 as well as armed movements in the DRC. But is it surprising to you this time around that in this report, it alleges that the Rwandan defense minister himself is personally in control of the rebellion?
Well, of course, these are very serious findings, and it's a very serious thing for a defense minister to be found responsible for such activities. Is it a surprise? Well, as you mentioned, there is some history of support to rebellions. There was a period when the cooperation between Rwanda and DRC improved quite markedly, while one former rebellion, the CNDP, was integrated into the DRC army. But that cooperation appears to have unraveled somewhat, and these are alarming developments.
Just how compelling do you think the evidence is that not only Rwanda, but Uganda as well is supporting the rebellion?
Well, I should say at the outset that I've not had a chance to go through this new report. It's currently in the hands of the Security Council members. It will be made public in due course, and I look forward to going through it. What I can say is, based on my own experience working with this team, and 5 out of 6 of the current members of the team I know personally and have worked with, I can vouch for their professionalism. I can say that they were picked, selected by the UN Secretariat and cleared by all the members of the UN Security Council before they could begin work. And in the period when I was working, we did have quite good and effective cooperation with both the Ugandan authorities and the Rwandan authorities as we looked into the activities of Rwandan and Ugandan opposition groups based in the DRC. And at that point there were no accusations of bias or of problems with our methodology. The methodology is quite strict. It does, of course, have to rely on first-person testimony. There's a strong preference for direct witnesses to events. We have to triangulate findings, not just rely on single sources. Assess the credibility of those sources. It's pretty rigorous, and it would take a remarkable degree of creativity to invent the amount of detail that goes into these reports, and indeed has been appearing from other sources such as Human Rights Watch and the International Crisis Group, not to mention civil society sources within DRC, as perhaps Kris Berwouts may be well placed to comment.
I will come to Kris in just a moment, but Olivier, first over to you if you would like to respond to what Fred was saying.
Thank you. The problem here, we are coming to the same point, which is evidence provided. This is the main, we are dealing with an investigating report with a serious organization, the UN. And then the whole issue is that we just have unnamed testimonies from the DRC. We don't have any piece of evidence. This is the main point. And if I can point out just one point, there was an accusation in the report, in the last report. There was an RDF, an ID of a military so-called Rwandan captain who was captured by the DRC government, DRC army in Congo, fighting alongside the M23. But in our rebuttal, we have demonstrated that this captain, this official, is not Rwandan. He is Congolese. We provided his regiment number, we provided his battalion, his commander, everything. And then the group of experts came back in the last report, their final report, saying that we have investigated and we have find out that Rwanda has infiltrated the DRC army back in 2007. And then one of those infiltrated Rwandans in the DRC government has fabricated a fake RDF ID for cover-up. This is nonsense. If there is an infiltrated in DRC government, DRC army, why fabricating a Rwandan ID which would put him in danger? Then they are trying to justify themselves because we have debunked point by point all of their allegations.
All right, let me bring in Kris. Kris, according to the report, Uganda also supports the M23, and it's allowed the political branch of the group to operate within Kampala. Is this the first time the extent of Ugandan alleged support has been made public?
Well, it was quite obvious in the last weeks and months. You could follow the physical movements of the M23 leadership, and so people received a lot of facilities in Kampala, including on organizing their communication strategy and the website and all. A lot of things are done from Kampala. Apart from that, apparently. Kampala, Uganda was involved in supporting specific military operations. But of course, Uganda seems to be much more modest and discreet in its efforts to support the M23. It's not as overwhelming as the Rwandan support.
But what do you make of that, Kris? Because Uganda itself, in fact, has been mediating between the Congolese government as well as the rebels. So in light of this report, I mean, does this undercut Uganda's role as an honest broker?
Well, Uganda, of course, has not much of credibility as a mediator in a conflict where it's a player in the field. It's part of the conflict. So I don't think that many people in the region really believe that Museveni and Uganda can incarnate dynamics of peace.
Kris, so who do you think then is driving the rebellion in the eastern DRC?
Well, I think the report is very clear. Not only it confirms things which have been said earlier in the provisional report of June, but there are much more details coming from deserters. M23 has lost some of its military and political leaders, people who came back to the Congolese side, who left M23. And so some of them brought a lot of operational details about how it's actually organized, the recruitment, including the recruitment of child soldiers, the weaponry, and also the leadership, the operational leadership and the strategic leadership which comes from Rwanda. This report gives a lot of details. Myself, I'm in touch. I'm in permanent dialogue with diplomatic and intelligence environments, and at this stage, I don't think that anybody is doubting really the main conclusions of the report. The way Rwanda is reacting is a pattern which you can see for the last decade and a half, nearly. Denying it and saying there's no evidence is something which has been done in 2000 when the first evidence came in on the plundering of the Congo. It has been, the same strategy has been followed by Rwanda, following accusations of supporting the different generations, let's say, of rebellion movements in Congo. So I'm not surprised of the behavior of the reaction of the Rwandese government, but it's not. I'm not impressed neither.
Olivier,
can one of the panelists name a single aspect, a piece of material, or a factually based evidence on provided by the group of experts, except the allegations, hearsay, unnamed intelligence officer? This is the key issue here, because we are dealing with an investigation report. And I don't know if I have time to talk about the Uganda.
I'd rather you just spoke about Rwanda and gave us the reaction of the Rwandan government.
Yes, I can talk, obviously, for the Uganda government, but the fact that Uganda is accused now, while the ICGLR process is starting to shaping a solution for the Eastern DRC is more than a coincidence.
Olivier, the UN report also says that this is, in fact, a part of a Rwandan project to annex the region, the Eastern DRC, by default to extend its political and economic influence in a very wealthy, what's known as a very wealthy, mineral-rich region. What's your reaction to that?
Actually, there are three contradicting motives alleged by the group of experts on this war of M23 allegedly supported by Rwanda. First, they say that it's for natural resources. This is what they say. Second, they say that Rwanda and M23 want the independence of Kivu. And then there is a new motive, purpose of this war that is in the final report. They say that the main political opposition party in DRC, the UDPS, led by Etienne Tshisekedi, sent envoys in Bunagana in North Kivu to discuss with the president of M23, Runiga, and then they agreed that the M23 will open the front line westward, take over Kinshasa, overthrow the government, and then put Etienne Tshisekedi in power. This is really nonsense, because we know that UDPS and its combatants, what the so-called combatants, are the mostly anti-Rwanda elements we have seen even in Europe when they attacked Rwandan. And saying that we want not only to take over Kivu, but also to take over the whole DRC, with the support of the main political opposition party and its leader, Etienne Tshisekedi, it's really nonsense.
All right, let me bring in Fred. Fred, I mean, do you believe that militias...
read in the report.
Fred, do you believe that militias such as the M23 are being used as proxies for the battle over the rich mineral region in the eastern DRC?
Well, I think as soon as they accept foreign support, then they are, by definition, becoming proxy forces, yes. As to the long-term goals of and the strategy behind that, obviously one is forced to speculate. But I should just come back on this point about unnamed sources, because it is important that people understand that working on sensitive issues like the conflict in Eastern DRC, there is also a responsibility to keep safe the identities of the sources that the group works with. Whether that is a former child soldier, a former combatant, ordinary civilians, officials, etc. Everyone can face some risks in discussing these sensitive matters with the group, and therefore it's not surprising that the report has to protect their identities. That does not mean that that should not indicate to anyone that this has been fabricated. It's just a common sense measure. And it's common practice, of course, within reporting, within human rights reporting, and within UN reports to follow that procedure.
Right. Well, the Democratic Republic of Congo has had a turbulent past. Now, it gained independence from Belgium in 1960, but it immediately faced an army mutiny, and the UN voted to send in troops to establish order. In 1965, Joseph Mobutu seized power, and later he renamed the country Zaire, and he retained power until 1997, when Rwanda invaded to flush out Hutu militias. Laurent Kabila was installed as president, and he renamed the country the Democratic Republic of Congo. A year later, rebels backed by Rwanda and Uganda rose up against Kabila. Angola, Namibia, and Zimbabwe were drawn into a 5-year conflict known as Africa's World War. An estimated 3 million people died, and during this time, Joseph Kabila succeeded his father, who was shot dead by a bodyguard. In 2006, he won the first free and fair presidential elections in 40 years, and Kabila was re-elected in a disputed poll last year, but his years in office have been dogged by violence, which continues to this very day. Fred, what should the position of the international community be today on the latest violence in the eastern DRC, and in light of this leaked UN report?
Well, obviously the first thing is that they should be paying very close attention despite the other calls on their time. The UN Security Council first and foremost, but also regional bodies like the African Union. And of course the ICGLR is working away at a solution to the crisis, but as has been mentioned, that does involve certain parties to the conflict. Now, paying close attention is one thing. There is, of course, an ongoing peacekeeping operation in DRC, a very large one, that needs ongoing support.
Kris, is there a fear that this could develop into a regional war?
To be honest, I don't have the impression that M23 has the capacity to launch a new war, a full-scale rebellion even. So far, despite the support, it remains quite localized. But my big fear is that underlying, as long as the rebellion, as M23 remains active and remains out of control of the central government, it rapidly weakens the position of the Congolese army, which is already in a very difficult situation. The disintegration of that army is accelerated by M23. And another dimension for me is that I see a very fast polarization between ethnic communities in Congo because of the pressure put by M23 on the process. So I see a lot of damage. I see a disintegration, but I'm not sure if I see an open war. It's not a scenario like the Ivory Coast. I see more a scenario like Somalia, and that's not something to look forward to.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much to all my guests, Olivier Nduhunigirehe in New York, Fred Robarts in London, and Kris Berwouts in Brussels. Thanks for joining us on Inside Story. And to our viewers, we thank you for watching as well. You can send us your feedback. Email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From myself and the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.